If you're trying to play a higher level tennis, one of the most important shots for you to develop is going to be a good, consistent inside-out forehand, because this is the shot that allows you to exploit your opponent's backhand. So that's why in this video, I'm going to be breaking down the fundamentals to developing a consistent inside-out forehand. I hope you find the video helpful. If you do, it'd be great if you could give me a thumbs up. And if you haven't subscribed to my channel before, really appreciate it if you could do that as well. The first key piece of developing a consistent inside-out forehand is going to be the mindset and the way that you think about it. Because even at higher levels, we're not necessarily thinking about getting out there and crushing every inside-out forehand. In my experience, a lot of players deal well with pace. But if you hit a heavier ball with a little bit more spin deep into the backhand, that's the one that causes the vast majority of players' problems. So when you approach training for consistency, you've really got to have the right mindset and not try and go for too much. Instead, focus on the fundamental pieces that we're going to be talking about now. The first and most important part of your inside-out forehand is going to be your preparation and movement to the ball. This is a shot where you need to be fast and you need to be set up in the right position, and this is something that holds the vast majority of players back. And when it comes to the preparation, there's really two parts to it. We've got the footwork and then we've got the reaction speed. Now, on the reaction speed front, a lot of players' visual systems don't function at a sufficiently high level, but I've created a free masterclass to teach you how to train and improve your visual function so that you can react more quickly. I'll place a link up there and I'll place a link down in the description so that you can check that one out if you're interested. Because what I want to do now is kind of focus on the footwork side and the preparation, because that's something you're definitely going to need to practice. Now we're going to start with a good quality split step. We need to land nice and wide and stable, and we need to lower our center of gravity. We need both of these pieces because that's what's going to allow us to get a good, powerful initial first step. So we're going to be thinking about landing about a hip width and a half to 2 hip widths apart, depending on how flexible you are, landing on the balls of your feet rather than your heels so that you can push off, and landing on the inside of the balls of your feet so that you can push off more effectively. We're lowering our center of gravity by bending our knees a little bit and leaning our body forwards a little bit. Ideally having the shin and the body at around the same angle with a neutral pelvis. This is going to allow us to push off and be as efficient as we can with our movement. The next piece is going to be the first step, and this is crucial for speed. It's really a two-part thing. I'm going to be pushing off my right leg, and I'm going to be dropping my left leg underneath and doing this. And you'll notice that as I do that, I'm getting the unit turn as well. And you might want to break it down and practice just dropping the leg underneath first, because it's a bit of an unusual movement. So get used to doing that and then start practicing pushing off that right leg. And you're really going to stay low and you're going to get a big push to try and cover as much ground as you can. The next piece is going to be the movement to the ball. And we're going to move in a slightly different way depending how far the ball is away. If the ball is close, we're going to be using shuffle steps. So maybe it'll just be one shuffle step. Maybe we need to do 2 shuffle steps. If the ball is further away, we're going to need to do running steps. And for both of them, the key is going to be to stay nice and low. So when I'm shuffling, I'm staying nice and low. When I'm doing the running steps, I'm staying nice and low. And on those running steps, I'm also using lots of little steps rather than taking big steps. And then the position that we set up in is going to be really key. So we need to make sure that we're using adjustment steps. So potentially that might be the adjustment steps to make sure I've got the right spacing, or we might need some little stutter steps just to finalize the position. So I might have to do a shuffle step followed by a couple of stutter steps, or maybe I do a couple of shuffle steps and then I have to do a couple of stutter steps forwards. just to finalize my position. After the preparation, this is the hardest part about hitting a good inside out forehand, because the reality is there isn't one single way to do this. We need a couple of different options depending on what type of ball that we're dealing with. So we need good fast footwork and movement to set up in the right position, but even then we still need options. Now if we've got plenty of time, then potentially we can loop our run, step in and hit from a neutral stance. But that's only going to happen when the ball is a little bit weaker. A lot of the time there simply isn't the option of stepping in and hitting from a neutral stance. And this is where you'll need to be using different footwork patterns that you might not be familiar with. When you watch high-level players play, the vast majority of the time when they're hitting an inside-out forehand, it's going to be one of these following three options. So we've got a two-legged pivot. So a two-legged pivot, we're driving through our right leg, our outside leg to initiate it, but the key piece is that we're going to have to get the pelvis around. So both legs are going to pivot to allow us to initiate and drive our racket forwards to start the kinetic chain. So the two-legged pivot looks like this. It's one of the most common footwork patterns that you'll see. A player will load up and they'll do a two-legged pivot, and this pivot can happen in a couple of different ways. So as I've just demonstrated here, I might set up and the pivot might make me move a little bit back towards the center of the court, but often it doesn't. Maybe I might not have enough time for that, so now I'm moving back. I do a two-legged pivot, but now I'm kind of rotating because my body weight is going away. So I've set up, I didn't quite have enough time, I've hit my shot, and now I'm rotating away. I'm landing on my left leg, but both feet are kind of pivoting round together. So we've got those two options depending on whether we get set up in time or whether we're not quite there in time and we actually have to create a little bit more space in between us and the ball. If the ball is a little bit higher and we've got a little bit more time, we might need to do a kickback. So we'll set up in position and we'll jump and do a kickback. So as I load into the ball, my right leg will be kicking back. This will often be a little bit more of an aggressive, slightly flatter ball, whereas the other two, there'll probably be a little bit more spin on the ball. And then a final variation is going to be a reverse single leg pivot. So I set up in position, and now in order to be able to bring my hips around, in order to be able to get my racket up the back of the ball, I'm doing this pivot with my left leg. So a little bit similar to how we've just created a bit of extra space there, but now I'm creating that space and coming up the back of the ball by doing the pivot step. So we've got these different options that we need to practice and work on to really develop a consistent inside out forehand, because if you try and use the wrong footwork pattern on the wrong type of ball, it simply doesn't work, and that's one of the biggest things that's going to lead to mistakes. So you need to kind of practice them individually. It's a good idea to kind of break them down and kind of get used to them without the ball first, because some of them are very unusual, and then you'll start to more naturally be able to do it once the ball is in play. The final piece that we've got for improving your consistency is going to be trying to watch the ball through to contact as efficiently as you can. So ideally, you'll be tracking the ball with your eyes and your head, and you'll be keeping your head still through contact and trying as best you can to watch the ball make contact with the strings. Now, a couple of points are going to be important here. The first one is that, again, this is going to be heavily dependent on your visual function. A lot of players don't have sufficiently high visual skills in order to be able to watch the ball through to contact. And if that's the case for you, which it potentially might be, it's a good idea to check out that masterclass that I mentioned earlier that teaches you how to train and improve your visual function. The other thing that you want to keep in mind with watching the ball through to contact is it's the final thing that happens, and it takes a lot of concentration. So potentially, if you're really focusing on your preparation or focusing on these individual footwork patterns, you might not watch the ball through to contact as well as you could possibly do just because there isn't enough focus left over. That's okay, it's a process. The first place to start is with the preparation. You nail the preparation, get that down so you can do that efficiently. Then you kind of start to work on the individual footwork patterns as you're making contact with the ball. Once you've got both of those down and they've become habitual, which can take a period of time, then you'll have a lot more kind of brain power and focus left over to make sure you're watching the ball through to contact. So these are kind of the different steps and things that you want to incorporate and go through if you really want to develop that high quality inside out forehand that's nice and consistent, that's going to allow you to exploit your opponent's backhand. Hopefully you found this video helpful. If you did, it'd be fantastic if you could give me that thumbs up. And if you haven't subscribed to my channel, again, it'd be really appreciative if you could do that as well. If you've got any comments about what we've covered here, leave them down below.